is up, sexy people of the internet? It is Dave. It is Duncan. Back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. For this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from Swedish post-metal sludge quartet, Kollaps. The band's new album, Kollaps, will be released on February 28th via These Hands Melt. So, Kollaps has garnered a reputation for their immersive soundscapes and heavy riff, blending elements of post-metal and sludge to create a unique auditory experience. On album 2, fans can expect a collection of tracks that not only showcase the band's signature style, but also push the limits of their musical exploration. The album promises to be a compelling journey through sound, reflecting the band's evolution and artistic growth. Each track is crafted with intention, aiming to resonate with listeners on various emotional levels. The self-titled album serves as a testament to Kollaps's commitment to authenticity and creativity in their music. We are thrilled to share this new chapter in our musical journey with our fans and supporters. We believe that the self-title captures the essence of who we are as artists, and we can't wait for everyone to experience it. So, a little
You're
bit
giggling. Why are you giggling?
A little bit of information, backstory here. We reviewed an album back in March 2024.
All right, that's recent memory, so we should be fine here.
That band was called Kollaps. All right,
Yes.
spelt with a K.
Yes.
So when I saw this coming in, I was like, "Oh shit, that's a quick turnaround. These guys are churning the releases out." Turns out, no. The Kollaps we reviewed last year are a Danish post-sludge band,
That's right.
and this Kollaps, also spelt with a K, are from Helsingborg in Sweden.
I mean, that's a different country, Dave. There is a bridge separating them. There's a
Two
TV
different-
show called The Bridge which separates them.
Yep. Two different bands, two different countries, very similar spelling of band name.
This one's missing letters, Dave. It's KLPS.
Yes, so they shorten it. Even the style is very similar as well. Like, you can see how I made the mistake. However, to be honest, I'm kind of glad it's a different band, because once I realised, I was like, okay, well, I've nothing to compare this to. I'm just going to listen to this as it is, no preconceived ideas of how it's going to sound. And then I looked at the artwork and I was like, okay, that kind of gives it away. This is the greatest album cover of all time. And if that doesn't scream post-metal, then I don't know what does, Duncan. I don't know.
I mean, it's Sweden, home of post-metal.
So, having now heard their first album, Phantom Center, which was also released in 2023, 2 years ago.
Right.
Went back and checked that out, because I like to do a little bit of research.
Dave is all about that research.
Wee bit of homework.
Some people would call him a teacher's pet, and he is technically the teacher, so.
Some Inception shit going on here. You can hear from the initial debut, like, you can hear there's definitely been some evolvement since that album, shall we say. Phantom Center was a little bit, let's say, kind of like rougher around the edges a little bit. Still within that like post-metal, sludge, doom kind of realm. But it's had like a kind of spacey, kind of post-rock kind of flexibility to it as well. But you could tell it was like early days. You could tell it was a first album. But also, you could also feel like, okay, this band probably have potential to go on and do something bigger. And that's where this self-titled album steps in. First off, production of this album, a clear level above Phantom Center. Phantom Center was cool, but it was like lacking in something. It was a little bit, maybe a little bit of sharpness. I don't know. It was kind of too smooth sounding for a post-metal album. Just lacked a little bit of bite for me. The opening track here, Subverse, very different. It's very metallic. It's very, dense, full of weight, but there's a nice clarity to it as well. and just feels like so much bigger than, you know, what they did on the previous album. The other thing was I engaged with this much quicker. So Phantom Center took me like a few tracks of the album to kind of get a feel for it. With this self-titled, I was like, all right, first track, I was like, all right, okay, like I'm in. I know what I'm getting here. I like this kind of shit. Let's continue. I think that was also because of the kind of little adjustments they've made to their songwriting here. The kind of rhythmic shifts they've made on this album are much more appealing, much more rewarding. The lead works better. The groove just felt more appealing as well. But also, although it was heavy and like very like kind of crushing in the riffs department, there's also a side to Kollaps that displays a bit more kind of balance, a bit more stability to their sound. The opening track actually has some nice like uplifting chords in the last kind of third of the track, and the lead work gives it almost like a touch of a more kind of progressive feel as well at times. So although like when I was listening to this album, yeah, there's little influences. There's like, oh yeah, there's a bit of Breach or Neurosis or Cult of Luna in here. There's also like other little things that was like, okay, that sounds like more of the band's personality coming through. And I didn't really get a lot of that on the debut, but I could hear it coming through much more on this release. The other thing that kind of came across in this release was how much more cohesive it sounds as an album. Phantom Center had like connecting moments throughout the album, but this album was much more consistent. The flow of it was much better from track to track. Never felt like I was listening to one long song either. I felt there were small shifts and ideas on each track that just gently separated them from each other, gives them a little bit more personality. And although like this album does sit within a similar tempo, it's not, the tracks aren't identical though in BPM. There are small fluctuations here and there, and I thought that was really a good way of just kind of add to the feeling of the cohesion, because they're not massive switches, they're not going from like slow doom to blast beats or anything like that, but there's enough kind of change in the tempo that you could tell you were on a different track, if you know what I mean. Also they've increased the runtime of a lot of these tracks on this album, so in comparison to the debut, you got kind of much shorter tracks on that release. I feel like with this one you're getting a bit more of the band coming through again, so they're getting their chance to kind of show more of their songwriting, more of their arrangement skills. This feels a bit more planned out, like they've kind of thought of the journey of each track with a bit more detail. So when you feel like, I feel like there's moments on these tracks where they maybe would have shifted quicker before, and this time they're maybe just kind of sitting in the idea a bit longer. And I found that much more refreshing. Like there's certain sections of these tracks where they just let it infuse for a little bit. There's a big like atmospheric section in Tribulation where the guitars go nice and clean, but they're quite wiry sounding. There's a nice kind of pulsing kind of bass happening as well in the background, and it was nice to hear them just kind of take their time, just let the track breathe a bit before they come back in with the big kind of wave of post-metal heaviness towards the end. Vocally, like it's kind of savage. Like vocally, it's weird. Like there's not a huge amount of movement in the vocal range. You get there's a bit of kind of doubling up with some backing vocals, which are a little bit deeper. But for the most part, Daniel, the vocalist, he just kind of keeps this as raw and visceral as possible. And like it sounds very Scandinavian. Like when I heard him scream for the first time, I was like, okay, right.
I would almost put a pin on the map.
Yeah, totally. I was like, is it Denmark? Is it Sweden? It's kind of somewhere in there. Like there's a character to his voice. You're like, all right, okay, we know what part of the world this guy is from. But it works really well. I think he adds a nice level of menace to these tracks, that just... When I was listening to it, I was like, fuck, this would be cool to see live. So it did make me like feel like I want to go and see them after hearing them, and especially vocally, like he's got a really just fucking raspy, horrible attack. Like he's got a really cool tone, and it suits the tracks really well.
The sort of band that like strobe lighting is essential. If you know what I mean?
Yeah. The last two tracks, for me, there was a couple more ideas kind of thrown in the mix. which was cool to hear. So Undertow has some almost kind of like 80s kind of synths in the track that kind of tie the last part of the track together. But it also does link with some of the synths they used earlier in the album as well, like on Catharsis as well. The only thing about that was I felt like when I heard that part on Undertow, I was like, man, I think they could have used this a little bit more. Like, just
Yes, Dave.
just if I'm totally honest,
Wouldn't fucking mind me and you, honestly.
Nice. That was my only thought. I was like, a little bit more. And then the closing track, Aureola, it kind of shows the band a more kind of more of an intimate side, where like they have some really nice clean parts where they inject a bit more space into the track. It's got a nice post rock kind of meets like atmospheric sludge kind of vibe. And although there are vocals in the first half of the track, the last 4 minutes is just completely instrumental. And I quite enjoyed the way it played out. Just the band kind of playing it out without any vocals on it. I thought it was a really nice way just to kind of end the album. I like, for a band I thought I'd heard before, but I actually hadn't. I really dig what these guys are doing. I don't necessarily think there's something, they're not necessarily reinventing the wheel. I think their blend is it's not a new take on the genre, even using synths. It's becoming more common in post-metal albums as well. But I like the progression they made as a band. I think this is a much more rewarding album than the debut. It's savagely heavy. It's got a real bleak side to it. It's produced really well, and like 42 minutes is actually quite a shortish album for a post-metal release. Like those do tend to kind of go a bit longer. So like when I was hitting like play on the respins, it didn't feel like hard work at all. Like it wasn't like an album that I felt exhausted after listening to either. So really really enjoyed it. Glad to hear another band called Kollaps on the on the map here as well.
Now, if Norway can have a band called Kollaps, we could coordinate that whole fucking side.
I quite enjoyed it though. What about yourself? What are you thinking? What did you think of this one?
So for those that have listened long enough to the stuff we do, you'll know that I have a weak spot for post-metal. I love a good post-metal album.
Yeah.
Post-metal it shares a lot with industrial metal, which is a genre I fucking adore. It's my genre. So it's just the metal. It's like the extreme metal version of industrial, really. It's all about kind of monolithic riffs and movements and music layered in an interesting and clever way. So I didn't have the same "is this the Danish band?" all that stuff that you had, mostly because I remember like when you were describing it, I was like, oh yeah, Kollaps, the guys with the pink cover. That came back to me there.
Yeah.
But I couldn't remember fucking anything else except that I think they played recently in Glasgow. We never got a chance to go and see them. But in the case of this one here, you're right. Like if you look at the album artwork here, it's a post-metal album straight away. And in that respect, I was kind of excited because we don't do a lot of post-metal. We had an influx a couple of years ago, but there was tons of it.
Yeah.
And since then, there've been bands that have been like post-metal adjacent as an element, or bands that have kind of moved away from it. Like I'm thinking about bands like The Ocean. Yeah. That last album they released had some of it, but it wasn't really the predominant feature in their sound. So Subverse kicked in, and I was getting those big, huge slabs, industrial slabs of post-metal that come through, and it was kind of cool. I want to link back to something you mentioned before. I think I always liked Cult of Luna. I thought Cult of Luna were cool, right? And Vertical came out, and I've spoken about this ad nauseum. Vertical for me was like almost life affirming, and the reason it was life affirming, it was the first time I heard the band say, right, we have a high level concept, and we're going to bring in kind of sci-fi synths to underline it, and it was all through the album, and as a result, it sounded fucking incredible. I think Kollaps have missed a trick here. Of doing something similar.
Yeah.
The synth work on Undertow is amazing in how it's structured, and yes, it's kind of peppered before, but I do feel like it would add an extra element almost to their sound if it was utilised almost all the way through it, even if it was kind of buried and brought out for more prominent parts, I think it was one of the things that actually made the album sound a little bit more remarkable and stand out. They're on the heavier side of post-metal, mostly because of the vocals, though. Like, this guy is... It's how to describe it. It's like almost bordering on kind of death metal sludge. His tone is just pure gravel. So it's real, and the tone never breaks, at all. Which makes me wonder how much he has to stretch to do this. It sounds like he could record another 45 minutes and he'd be fine. But it's so powerful, and the presence behind it becomes another heavy element to the music. Very much like yourself, like the tracks run long here but didn't feel laboured, which is like a hard thing to do. Like, there's 2 tracks here that run easily over the 8-minute mark, and actually both Tribulation and Aureola are great examples of really, really smart composition, even with that closing track having essentially a massive amount of that runtime being instrumental. It suits the outro to the album, the way we're going to unpack what we're doing towards the end. My only gripe with this is I don't necessarily think Kollaps are doing anything remarkable within post-metal. A lot of what they've done here before is very much connective to the genre itself, and I could cite clearly what I think their influences are through their sound. That being said, I don't actually think there's anything bad here at all. I think what they do is by album 2, they've kind of affirmed a sound, which sounds very powerful, realised, and with a scope that's massive, which makes me kind of giddy to see what happens on another release, whatever that is, whether it's an EP or a new album, to see if they lean more into more synth work, or that changes out and they go in a different direction. Cult of Luna only ever did one album that sounded like Vertical. Everything else has not sounded like it since. Kollaps might be the same. They might be like, we've done that now, or they might go higher concept. The world's our oyster. I will say it's always exciting to hear another post-metal band come out with like a grasp of what their sound is so early in their career. And from that point of view, I think they do a lot that's really commendable in their sound. I just don't necessarily think it's the most original thing I've heard. That being said, it has been a while since I listened to a post-metal album, so I did spin it a few times selfishly, because I'm like, I miss this stuff. There used to be a lot more bands doing it, and there doesn't appear to be as much anymore. So, I'm curious to see where you land with your scoring. I have a very, very firm grasp of where I'm going.
Nice. So let's do that. I found this solid. Like, it's nothing that's like groundbreaking or like treading on new territory. There's, as you said, you can hear a lot of influences on there. I think they could have pushed the synths a bit more, would have given it a little bit more personality throughout. But I enjoyed it. Like, I found it a really easy listen. Production was nice and heavy. Loved the vocals. Great guitar tone. So there was nothing that I would like criticized heavily about it, to be honest. I found it a fairly easy listen. For me, it's a 4 out of 5 for me. What about yourself? What are you thinking?
I'm coming in marginally below you. I'm coming in 3.5.
Right.
I think there's a great future for these guys. I really, really do. I think we're still seeing a very raw version of a band feeling out what that creative sound and process is for them just now. I think with time, we could see great things coming from them. And once again, to remind those people out there that may be going on the audio version of this, and maybe not the visual element, this is KLPS, not Kollaps spelt with a K, right? So don't be away listening to the Danish band going, I don't know what the fuck these guys were on about. Different band. But I got 3.5 to me. I think one to watch. Definitely one to watch.
Yeah, for sure. So that one is Kollaps, self-titled, out on February 28th on These Hands Melt. I'll put some links below at the band, Bandcamp, all that sort of stuff. You check out one of the singles. Let us know what you think. Have a listen. I'm happy to hear your thoughts and opinions on it. That is a review. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon. But until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.